afternoon. Welcome to our conversation here at the Expo EDU stage. Our Ag Talk this time around is going to focus on organic agriculture, how to overcome obstacles and be successful in that type of agriculture production. I'm Chad Moyer. I work for KTIC and the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. We are the only farmer-owned group of radio stations, not only in Nebraska, but across the country. 4,000 farmers and ranchers own the cooperative. The cooperative operates 14 radio stations in Nebraska, and we have a statewide network. So, been here 17 years, just loved moving from Minnesota to Nebraska and serving agriculture in this part of the world. I'm going to introduce our panelists here so that you get an idea of who we're going to be conversing with over the next 45 minutes or so. And sorry, Trevor, I didn't ask you how you pronounce your last name. Fehr? Well, that's fair. Trevor Fehr from MJF Farms. Tom Schwarz, farmer, and Mike Sides, he's with Clear Frontier Ag. This is our panelists here today. So gentlemen, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and being here today. So Trevor, let's start with you. Just give us a little bit of background information about you, where you farm. Tell me about the operation.
Yeah, so I farm with my dad and a couple of brother-in-laws in north central Iowa. My dad started switching over to organic, transitioning into organic, I think close to 20 years ago. So we've been growing from there and going through the struggles and everything else that goes with organic. But overall, it's been a really good journey. And now we are selling some Trefler tine weeders, which goes hand in hand with organic for weed control. And it's been good financially, and it's been good for our family.
If you don't mind telling us how big of a farm and what are the crops, what are the products that are coming off your farm?
Yeah, so our farm is between 2,000 and 3,000 acres organic, and we also have some transition in there too, acres. Our rotation normally is corn, beans, corn, soybeans. So we a lot of times transition with alfalfa. So that works good for transition for the weed control aspect. You're mowing the weeds off, and it's fixing nitrogen into the ground, the alfalfa. That's worked really good for us. So transition with alfalfa, and then we usually go corn, organic corn our first year, and then go with our rotation from there. Sometimes we'll change the rotation up depending if we need to get our rotation balanced or something like that.
Okay. So what was the key for your farm, for your family? Why did you decide to seek the organic production way?
Yeah, I would say financially is probably the biggest thing, especially with the conventional prices sometimes downturning and lower acres. We didn't have a lot of acres, and so to bring us kids in and grow the farm that way, that's kind of the option that Dad started, and we've been taking it from there and growing it from there.
Trevor from north central Iowa, thank you for being here. Tom Schwarz, tell us a little bit about you, give us a little bit of background, and tell us about your farm.
I farm in the Bertrand area, central southwest Nebraska. My wife and our two kids, and then we do have an employee. We have a commercial hay grinding business we do as well as farming. We started in organic. Principally, we operated at a fairly large scale. We were about 2,500 acres of gravity irrigated farm ground in the 80s and the early 90s. And of course, those of you that have a little gray hair remember what the 80s and 90s were like, and it was pretty rough. Dad in the mid 90s said, let's switch gears and cut back. We dropped a bunch of acres and just handled what he and I could do without any employees. Well, then unfortunately he passed away right away. And so my sister, this is an estate lesson for all of you, wanted out of the operation. This is not uncommon. And so our operation got cut in half. Well, then it got cut in half again with the estate. So I had to make a lot of decisions in how I could survive with that much smaller acreage. And I felt organic was an option for me, and that's what led us to go that direction. And so we knew with organic, we thought we had a shot at bringing our kids back into the operation. My kids are in our operation, represent the 6th generation on our farm. And so that was kind of the story of why we ended up where we are. We do corn, soybeans, alfalfa, wheat, field peas, and then we throw some specialty crops in from time to time, white corn, blue corn, if the market's right. We have livestock from time to time if there's money in it, because you got to be a little materialistic or you're not going to be in the business very long.
All right, and we'll get into this over time too, but Tom, just as some thoughts, what is it like being an organic producer in the semi-arid region like where Bertrand is located? Is it, as you talk to your other farmers, is it easier, harder? What's that like, organic production where you are?
Both, sadly. There really isn't a clean-cut answer to that. Dryland organic is tough in our country, but then dryland farming in our country is tough, period. So I mean, it's but I love pivots for organic. They allow us to do things in a timely fashion. We can apply the water when we need it. So there's also advantages to not getting the rain that Trevor has to deal with in Iowa. The long week-long or 2 week long period of rain. So that helps.
All right. Thank you.
Haven't had much of that this past year, too.
This past year, that really wasn't a problem.
Not a problem. Mike Size, we're going to talk to him now. He's from Clear Frontier Ag, and maybe gives us kind of an agribusiness perspective on some of this too. First of all, again, tell me about Clear Frontier Ag. How are they active in this space?
Okay, might step back just a little bit, kind of give you the whole rotation. So I grew up in the ag community, and went to work with a prominent organic farmer, kind of learned the ropes and stuff like that, and then was afforded to have my own business with certification and stuff. And with that, it ran into Clear Frontier Ag, which is we're a land fund, and so we buy ground and we transition it to organic is what we do. It's pretty narrow, right down the fairway. Everything we do is transition to organic. So we buy conventional ground, organic ground, or development ground, and transitioning into organic through the 36-month process. And through that, then we use some of our direct contacts. We do a lot of direct business with organic dairies, organic chicken facilities, turkey facilities and stuff that take that product direct. So we're able to kind of eliminate a few steps in the process of the marketing train, if you will, and go that route. So it's been very successful. We're looking at probably having about 35 to 40,000 acres over the next 18 months. We'll finish that out. So
yeah, I was going to say from a business perspective or planning perspective, this has got to work out well on the inside, right? Coming in, the input into that farm, and then going out and being able to market those products that you harvest then too, right?
correct, yeah. Along with the input, we're able to buy those inputs at a cheaper cost, if you will, so we can prepay for stuff, bring it into our tenants, and then again, direct market the product going out also.
So I guess you personally, Mike, separate from the company or whatever, why is this something that you sought out and you decided that you were going to spend your time in?
Well, kind of like Tom mentioned, the challenge of it. It's very challenging. Organic farming is very challenging. There's a lot of management to it, a lot of forward management to it, and when it's time to take care of weed suppression or whatever, if you're not using cover crops or something, you have to be moving. So you can't go to the county fair every year and go to all the concerts and stuff. You're going to be out taking care of your fields with weed suppression or watering. There's a lot of management to it. It's fun. It's exciting too. And then of course, when you start seeing the pricing and stuff, like Trevor mentioned, you start growing a 250 plus bushel corn crop and are getting over $12 FOB the farm. That's pretty exciting. Pretty exciting.
Definitely. Well, thank you again, gentlemen, for being here. A word to the crowd. I want this to be very interactive. I've got some questions here that I'm going to throw out there, and they're going to respond to. I've got some topics, but I want you guys to answer questions too. I want this to be a back and forth conversation. So as we are having our panel here today, please feel free, raise your hand, get my attention, ask your questions, and then we'll have the panelists respond to some of these ideas. And again, I want it to be very interactive here. So let's talk about, since we just came off, the panel that was before this was talking about technology in agriculture. Who would like to respond about the technology that's being used in organic farming today? Is it very similar to conventional ag, or what technologies are you utilizing?
I would say it's similar, but not exactly the same. We've got some really exciting stuff we're utilizing in organics today. Some of it is older technology that's been revamped, and sometimes it's new stuff. I wish we had some videos of it here because it's really visually appealing. We run a weed zapper through our soybean fields, and if those of you that remember rope wicks back in the early days, it's similar to that. You run an electrode right above the soybeans, and we've got a great big tractor with a great big generator, and we literally electrocute the weeds. And I hate Palmer amaranth more than any weed I have ever been around in my life. If you ever, any of you that aren't dealing with Palmer yet, if you ever see one, whatever you do, go out, stop in the middle of the road and go kill it, because you do not want this stuff.
And then burn it, right?
Yeah, you want it gone. But you know, zappers are really cool things. Weight flamers, we flame almost everything, corn and beans. Those flamers work wonderful. They're a great tool. You know, guidance, honestly, I think guidance is one of the greatest things. You know, I think you need guidance more if you're an organic farm than if you're conventional, honestly. And it better be good guidance, you know.
I was going to say, that requires, probably because of cultivation and repeatability, to go over the same track multiple times, right?
Right, and then also photo guidance on the cultivators, I think, is a big thing. You know, we've always utilized wands on our cultivators, but you know, we've got to be going to photo guidance because we've got to run earlier and closer to the corn and beans than what we historically have. Finger weeders is something we utilize that a lot of guys don't even know what they are. And if you ever watch a video of a finger weeder working on a cultivator, you'll go, how is that not killing the soybeans? But it's just awesome the way the things work through the crop and tear out the little weeds. But timing, like Mike said, timing is everything. When it's time to go, you better go.
Trevor, what technology are you using on your farm? What have you got?
Yeah, so we do have a flamer. We've tried to use it some. We haven't used it a lot. What's been, for as far as weed control, which I think is one of our biggest challenges in organic farming that's worked for us, is tine weeders. And so we use truffler tine weeders, and it's kind of like a harrow. It's a bunch of, every like 1.1 inch, there's a tine that goes down, and you can run them through standing crops, especially like in soybeans. It'll tear out the grass but leave the soybeans if you get the tension right. So that's been huge on our farm as far as technology. And like he was saying, RTK is, I would say, almost a must. Some guys can drive really good, I can't, and getting your spacing set really tight, like cultivating. The closer you can cultivate or put a tine or something next to the row is huge, because the row is where you have the weeds. And that's where tiners work good for us, is we can put them in the row and it'll take weeds out of the row. And then as far as just technology, like we were talking a little bit before we came up here, like laser weeding and some of the AI technology and stuff like that, I think in the future maybe more prevalent and useful. I think it has a little ways to go yet, especially like the laser weeding. Just getting the acres per hour. A lot of these machines are 4 rows or real small, but if we could get something 16 rows, 12 rows, and cover more than like 3 acres an hour, it could become something that we could use widespread row crop. But so stuff like that, and again, the photo guidance, the implement guidance that moves the cultivator or tiner or whatever side to side to stay right on the row can be huge, especially if you have hills or if your guidance is a little squiggly.
Mike, can you talk about the organic crop markets these days? How do they? How have they been historically? How are they now?
Well, I should have had our finance director up here for that question, I guess. But historically, they typically run about double the price of conventional. Typically. Now, if you can get into a direct market of some source, they're going to be a little bit higher than that also. But some of the organic stuff, like we do a lot of alfalfa and stuff also. We truck that. We actually truck it down into Texas and stuff to the organic dairies down there. So you need a quantity of it, and you need to be able to supply them with an X amount of tons for forage or cropping or something like that also. So The marketing part of it, it's not really that hard because there's a big space. It really is a big space. It may not be right in the middle of Nebraska, what have you, but you get around the horseshoe of the United States and stuff, and a little bit in from there. There's a big space in the organic business. So,
Could you maybe explain, I guess, give some insights in how you market organic crops? Because I think it's different, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is different than a conventional grain where you would harvest it, put it in a bin, and try and pick a market where where you're going to get the best basis or the best price or whatever the case may be. Do you have to do a little bit more on the front end than on the back end, or how do you go about marketing grain?
not necessarily. It actually is quite a bit. One thing that is probably more important is you have to have storage for organics, because they can only take a certain amount. Like you start sending it into a chicken facility or something, they can't take wet grain, so they don't have dryers and stuff. They want to bring it in, feed it, and it's just a rolling, just going through their feed mill, and it's just their feeding all the time. So you need storage for one. Two, most of your bigger grain companies, your Cargills, your Schoolers and stuff like this, still buy organic grain. They still do. The same guy that'll buy conventional grain will buy your organic grain also. Now when you get into direct marketing and stuff, you're just actually talking to the end user personally and setting up a game plan with them to manage that incoming load for them throughout the year. So yeah.
Tom or Trevor, do you guys have thoughts about organic marketing the product of your farm?
That's one thing I wish we could figure out. It seems like it can jump $1 a day. I think calling lots of different buyers, lots of different merchandisers. And some will let you contract early. Like we actually have a bunch of soybeans sold for next year already that we haven't even, I don't even know if we've quite sold all of this year's crop yet. But so you can do some of that if you want to get, lower your risk if you're afraid the market might go down. But yeah, the marketing can be interesting, and just calling one buyer to the next, you could raise the price 50 cents, $1. And the location where it's going, I think it helps having a higher quality or higher priced commodity. You can haul it further. Yeah, we've had truckloads of corn go to Indiana, down to Texas. So there is a lot of market. The market's, we're a small percentage, but it's growing.
Tom, we're going to shift and talk about weed control just for a couple of minutes, because you mentioned that your favorite weed ever is the palmer, right? So what in an organic system is tillage, or going out there with a machete and cutting the thing down? Is that your only form of weed control? How are you doing weed control in your operation?
No, you have to be thinking about weeds at every stage of the game. I mean, whether it's in the fall when you're planting cover crops or in the spring when you're doing tillage, if you have a field cultivator that has a shovel that's worn out and you don't catch it, you're going to have a problem. I mean, it's simple things like that, and as well, you have to do everything. Somebody's asked me one time, what do you think's the answer? I said everything. We do. We make sure we have an absolutely clean seed bed when we plant. Then we come in with a tine weeder, and we come in with a rotary hoe. We utilize a cultivator with finger weeders. We flame. In the beans, we utilize the zapper at some point. We use multiple cultivators. We start out with a fairly light cultivator, again with the photo guidance and that kind of thing, and then we finish up with a buffalo on the last end, because we throw up a ridge around the corn to kill the weeds that might be growing there against the corn. It's all about making sure your crop's ahead of the weeds, and then you can deal with it. If you can throw dirt up on it and kill it, that's. But every step of your operation has to be geared toward weed control. All the other problems guys talk about in terms of insects and diseases, I've never experienced. We put no chemicals. Well, we can't put chemicals on generally, but even if there was something available, we don't use anything. So it's all mechanical.
Gotcha. What about from the farm management side? You said you've got a significant number of acres. What's the way that you guys deal with some of these weed pressures?
So ultimately, it's a tenant's responsibility. but we offer agronomy help with it. One of it includes we're very, very, very strong with cover crops and picking the right cover crops and the amount of cover crops. And that's probably our most important thing that we persist to our tenants with is cover crop. Number one thing, keep your acres covered. We cover crop. We also, as a landlord, we use a couple of different technologies too that you can use conventionally and organically. One of them is Earth Optics. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's a compaction sled that they pull. We'll tell you what your compaction is out in your fields. So you can actually write a prescription to put in your tractor, and it will move your tillage equipment up and down to get rid of your compaction. Burns less energy through your tractor, and then again, when you plant your crops burn less energy. They can get up quicker ahead of the weeds at that point. We also use things on the irrigation side. Autonomous pivot is a big thing for us. It's a couple years old. It uses ground penetrating radar, so we can see actually how much water we need to put on the fields. And you can use this conventionally also. Obviously we're in a drought right now, so we're trying to save every amount of water, every drop of water we can, and put it to use where we need it at. So the cover cropping is number one, and then just giving our guys the help or knowledge of how to terminate those cover crops, whether they go in and shred it and then till it in so that they use that as a green manure, so that's part of their nitrogen nutrient source, and weed suppression. They're just picking the right things for your area on your fields, because nothing is ever the same. Nothing. You can have fields right across the road and it's not the same. I guarantee you. Tom's got a couple like that, a half a mile apart, and those fields are completely different. So, but we just encourage our people to cover crop. If you start with a good base, you're going to have a good foundation. Your rest of your year is going to be pretty good for you. It's going to be a lot easier to manage.
Tom, you made the comment that you don't have to deal with it much, the insects and the diseases, but to the other two, and I guess you can chime in, if you do have a problem with insects, because I can't imagine that you would never have to deal with insects or disease. In an organic system, how would you deal with some of those challenges as the crop gets older?
Well, the thing is, with the tools we utilize in organics, we literally just don't run into problems. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but we don't have insect issues. I have had one time a disease issue, and that's years ago on a field that Mike has now. We had, believe it or not, Goss's wilt start right on the driveway up to the pivot, and I thought, this is weird. We've never had this. Well, they finally figured out it was the guys working on our pivot had apparently drug it in from another field, and basically it was just right by the driveway. It was the only place we ever had a problem, and then we never had a recurring problem with it because of the system, the rotation system and whatnot that we use in organics. We just haven't repeated it. So, I mean, seriously, we just don't deal with insect or disease issues.
A lot of it, we really need to get like a soil scientist up here to explain this better, but the pathogens and the diseases and stuff that are in the soil, they're there all the time. They're just waiting for the right moment to rear its head. Using a cover crop brings in some different, again, going into the soil stuff, protozoa and predators and pollinators and the whole 9 yards. When you get all those beneficials, if you think back, you watch the Discovery Channel of Africa when the migration happens and stuff, and all of a sudden, there's just, everything just takes care of itself when you let nature take care of itself. It does. Simply planting the pollinator strips around your field or something to that effect, the cool, the bugs, the flowers, the plants, and I know, I'm not going to go out and hug a tree or anything. I don't live that close to it, but it just helps. It matters. It's always in the soil. It's always been there. Go dig a 50-foot hole. There's going to be a weed that show up within a week. They're always there. That's just how the earth is made. So you just use that rotation, eliminates those nematodes in the soil and stuff. They don't want to chew on corn. We left something sweet out there with a cover crop that we used, maybe a clover. So they stay on that and leave your cash crop alone.
Go ahead.
I might add one thing to that, and it kind of explains the situation. I was asked a few years back by a gentleman, you know, well, if you were offered a bunch of conventional ground, would you farm it? I said, well, if it made money financially, yeah, I don't have a problem farming conventionally. He said, so what would you do different? I said, I'd do less. Conventional farmers are being sold a whole lot of stuff they don't need because they're convinced, you know, oh, you got to have this fungicide or this nematicide, you know, or whatever it might be. Guys, we need funguses in the soil. They're an important part of the soil life. Nematodes, the same thing. They're an important part of soil life. And anytime you use a pesticide, you don't just kill the one thing, you kill it all. And so that's, I think, one of the things that we do that helps us not deal with these disease and insect problems.
Yeah, to add on to that, I would say even just like, yeah, the crop rotation, because you got insects that will, like corn rootworm beetles and stuff, but then you go to beans or you go to oats or you go to different, you don't have the corn on corn, so you got the rotation, I think helps. And even, I'm no soil scientist, but yeah, the soil, like these guys are saying, I think it comes alive. I think with chemicals, you get nutrients that are tied up. I think the soil gives you back more of those nutrients, stuff's released. And even night crawlers, things like that. Like you pull a bean and almost every bean there's a night crawler on the root. And it just, the soil comes alive, and healthy soil helps tremendously when it comes to insect problems, disease problems. We haven't seen a lot of issues either.
All right, great. Are there some questions from the crowd? Is there any burning question that you have on your mind that you would like to ask our panel? Sir, in the back.
Going back to marketing, you're talking about direct marketing. What would you say about risk of not getting paid or the relationship with a small buyer like that?
Okay. So the question has to do with marketing of the organic crop and that business relationship of whoever's buying your grain. Thoughts on that?
And you also mentioned the risk of not getting paid. Yeah, it happens. It's out there. It is. You want to vet that. You want to vet that buyer, 100%. You get into somebody like with say we work with a dairy that's farming. You know, they're milking 50,000 head. Probably going to be able to pay their bills pretty good. But at the same point, if you're not, I mean, it's no different than anything else. Maybe you only send 2 truckloads down, wait for your check. You know, maybe that's the relationship you have to have, one load at a time. Yeah, because it does happen. We've had some pretty big ones happen here over the last 18 months, and it hurt a lot of people. It really did. It was in the news, and it was a lot of millions of dollars. So, yeah, absolutely. But it's like with anything else, you got to vet the person you're working with. But there's a possibility. It always exists. Yeah, absolutely.
Tom, what do you think?
Well, again, to reiterate, you have to do your due diligence. If you're marketing with somebody, it's up to you to take care of that. You know, a lot of us grew up selling to the local elevator, and the elevator, they worried about all that stuff. And now you're actually marketing to, you know, whoever. You've got to know you're covered. I sent weed out to Utah, and the person that was handling it went bankrupt. And I mean, I was sweating blood there for a while because, you know, that's a lot of money that could have disappeared. Now this shows you the difference in the organic system though, as far as businesses. The folks that actually received that grain, they told me, don't worry, we're going to make sure you get taken care of, and they did. You know, there's a lot of good people out there too in the business, and if you can find those people, I don't chase an extra 10 cents on corn or whatever. I prefer to know I'm going to deal with somebody. I'll take a hit on my price in order to know I'm going to get paid.
And I think this next question goes somewhat, but a little bit broader. Just tell me about your management style. Just in the overall farming operation, on the production side, on the marketing side, you know, all aspects. Farming organically, does that require you to manage differently? Or what are the keys to managing in an organic system?
I would say there's a lot more management in organic system. We kind of, like our Mays and Junes are pretty much farming, like not too much for vacations in May and June. And like they were saying earlier, like weed control, like you got to be ahead of it. You got to be there. You got to be out in the field. It's a lot more tractor hours, but then there's a lot more to it, even just the certification and keeping your clean truck affidavits and all that. There's a lot to it. How we kind of do it a little bit is like my brother-in-law takes care of the certification paperwork, and you kind of split the jobs out a little bit. And when it comes to out in the field, we are all in tractors, and when the time comes, we're out there.
What about weed control and weed roads, like Quaker roads, whatever?
Weed control in small grains? That's the question. How do you accomplish that?
A lot of that comes down to what you do before you plant the wheat. We're real careful to make sure we've, again, got a clean seed bed when we put wheat in the fall. If you've got pennycress coming, you better get it out of there before the wheat's planted. We will change our timing on when we plant sometimes, just in order to avoid those kind of weed problems. Something I'm thinking about, I have not done yet. There's a lot of guys up in Canada that are actually using cultivation in wheat. They're going with a wide spacing, a 10-inch spacing on their drills, and with photo guidance on that cultivator, it will hold that cultivator so you can cultivate 10-inch rows. Pretty cool stuff.
Can we come back to the management? Because we were talking beforehand, before we went on the stage, and I want to get your guys' thoughts too about management and the mindset that it takes to do some of the things that you're required to do.
Well, when guys talk to me about whether they want to become organic farmers or not, there's certain things I ask to kind of find out what kind of operation they run. One, do you have a bean counter? You better have somebody that loves keeping track of records, and they're the people that keep you out of trouble with the certifiers. You've got to keep track of everything. We record everything. I was at a farmer meeting one time and guys were complaining about, farmers couldn't source grain. And well, you can, but it takes record keeping. And my wife, bless her heart, she's the person that takes care of us. She's probably one of the best record keepers in the country on organics. So that's a huge part of it. In terms of the operation management, there are farmers that I have literally told two farmers, this just probably isn't for you. There's no shortcuts in organics. There are none. And if you like going up to the lake and dropping a pole in during walleye fishing, yeah, this isn't going to probably work out very well for you. You have to do what you have to do when you need to do it. And if that's a day, a night, or a weekend, it doesn't matter. Timeliness is everything on organics.
Thoughts on management? Because I think it's so important that we should get three perspectives.
Yeah, no. So agree both with what they said. And yeah, you can't just fix organics with sprayers. It's not allowed. And management wise, you need to be thinking, 14, 18 months ahead. For instance, just talking nutrients. So we're bringing in nutrients in July of this past year to spread this time of year, to plant the crop in this next spring, to then harvest it in the fall, to then sell it in 2020, that'd be 5 spring. So before we even get a penny for the nutrients we bought in July of 2022, so there's a lot of management in that sense of, do I have enough nutrients? Is my banker going to let me hold on to this note for 14, 16 months out the road? There's a lot of management like that. Sourcing your seed and stuff is getting to be easier and easier nowadays. There's a lot of companies. The space is really big. The organic space is very large in the United States, believe it or not, very large. So there's, but you still have to be able to source it, because if you do use like somebody that does treat corn and stuff, because everything we plant is non-treated, non-GMO. So you got to make sure that it's not in the treater when you need it. And then maybe you come into a replant, maybe you get the spring rains come or something like that, and you have to replant. Well, now going and sourcing non-treated, non-GMO corn could be a deal. So you might have to reevaluate your rotations. So it's a lot of management. I like Tom said, everybody's got their own place. Like, you need to be able to put out fires, and a lot of fires, a little fire here and there, because they're always popping up, whether you're in the field with weeds, or you're sourcing corn, or you're sourcing nutrients, or you're marketing your corn. There's a whole bunch of little fires. So you just got to be excited about that stuff. And in order, that's what I like about organics, is it's a lot going on all at once.
Any questions from the crowd? I'm going to do a couple of rapid fire because just listening to this generated about 4 questions that I wrote down on my piece of paper. So I'll take 1, maybe 2 responses on each of these ideas. But let's talk about the interaction with the regulatory, the USDA, to have that organic certification, to get it and to maintain it. What does it take to do that? What should we be aware of with that?
It's 36 months from your last prohibited substance that you put on your field to qualify for organics. So if you spray something in July 4th in 2022, you can actually harvest a organic crop in the fall of 2025.
5? Yeah.
So as long as it falls after that date, you can harvest it. Your harvest date. So it's 36 months of that. Keep track of everything you do, going into the field, out of the field, and everything in between what you do in the field, and you're really pretty fine.
Do you have to keep records on your equipment to maintain your certification?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Clean if you're what they call parallel production, where you're farming conventional and organic. It's called parallel. So every time you bring that tractor into this field, an organic field, there's got to be documentation that you cleaned it off. Whether you washed it or used compressed air compressor, washed it off. Planter, same thing. Harvest, same thing. You bring your grain truck in, you have to have an affidavit that is cleaned off. Anytime you sell a product, corn, trucking company comes in, Nebraska Salt and Grain, for instance, comes in, you fill out the affidavit with your lot number, and it all gets tracked, and it goes out. A lot of paperwork, a lot of paperwork. Like Trevor said, his brother-in-law does it. I'm sure he does not enjoy it, but he does it. There's a lot of paperwork.
Thank you. Is anybody utilizing livestock in the organic crop production system?
We do from time to time. Again, being the greedy soul I am, if I can't make money on it, I'm reluctant to have it. We were experimenting with some organic cattle. I had a dairy up in Michigan that I was working with. I love that system, and we were utilizing cover crops and rotationally grazing those cover crops with these dairy calves, and then we actually took the calves to finish. And it was kind of a neat experiment we were doing. Unfortunately, my dairy went broke, and my source of cattle kind of went away, and that was a problem. I'm still looking for something to replace that, because this past year we didn't do anything. But even so, we try to get cattle out on corn stalks if we can, because they are livestock. Even if you're just doing regenerative work on your farms, it's a really important part of the process.
Trevor, I'll ask you this. Are there certain nutrient issues that you have to address on your farm? And then how do you go about addressing it?
Yeah, so in organic farming, I'd say fertilizer is kind of another big thing that's different or that you got to figure out. But the biggest source is manure. So like we use mostly hog manure and chicken litter for our source of fertilizer, and we have found like you can use lime for bringing your pH up, and gypsum. But there's a lot of things you can't use, and so like right now we have a couple fields that are low on boron, and I think you get some boron in hog manure, but sometimes it's not enough. So we're looking at, you got to talk to your certifier, find out what you can use. Sometimes if you're low on like a micronutrient like that, there's some exceptions, or they can find something that you can use. So we're looking into something like that for boron, but that's one example.
Any other thoughts about how you manage nutrition for the growing crop?
Cover crops are big. There's some cover crops out there, your clovers, sun hemps and stuff. I mean, for instance, sun hemp will give you 150 pounds of nitrogen in 60 days. Clovers will do, you can look at any college out there, they'll do 150, 175, 200 pounds of N over a certain amount of days. So it's out there, it's just a matter of doing the research and finding the plants and stuff. It's dry everywhere, so there is a shortage on cover crop seed right now.
Tom?
One of the hang-ups guys have about going to organic is fertilizing, And if I was going conventional, The air is full of nitrogen. We just have to figure out how to get it where we can use it. Yeah, we don't need to be buying all this stuff. And I know we had one year, we put no manure on a field. We raised 250 bushel corn, and the only nitrogen that corn had was from our previous crops. And it can be done. You know, it can be done.
We're getting close to the end of our time here. I've got two more questions. Is there a quick question from the crowd? Real quick.
If you had to choose between one piece of equipment, vision guidance, a flame meter, or a zapper, which one would you choose?
Vision guidance, a zapper, or what was the third choice? Flamer? If you had to pick between one of those three,
One of the three.
what would you pick?
Flamer.
Flamer? Flamer gets one.
I would probably go with the zapper, and my reasoning being the weed zappers allowed us to put soybeans back in our rotation. And while there's going to be some people argue against that, in my experience, that zapper is probably the most valuable thing.
Okay, flamer, zapper.
I would maybe lean toward the guidance, but I would really probably say a tiner, because we don't really use zappers or flamers. We try to keep the weeds controlled before that point.
Supply chain challenges have prevented the tiner from being available right now, so you have the choice of these three. Before we wrap up, yesterday we had a program on this stage about regenerative agriculture, and there were a couple of questions that tied the idea of regen ag to organic agriculture. I'm going to get your guys' opinion. Are the two connected? Are they two separate, completely separate concepts? Does regenerative agriculture connect with organic agriculture?
Well, you're looking at me, so yeah, I'll go first. I think it's regenerative / organic, or organic regenerative /. Regenerative farming to me is really simple. Use the sun, use the air, and use the rain. If you're not doing that, you're not regenerative farming. And to do that, you have to use cover crops, because you want something, like you said, you want something growing on your soil year round. Harvest the air, the nitrogen, the photosynthesis, and use the rain. Don't let it run off. Just because it rains 3 inches, how much do you keep of that 3 inches? What runs off? So you only keep, how much is your soil organic matter? And I'm going to get all fired up here, I'm sorry, but if it rains 3 inches, you may only be keeping 1 inch.
Well, it depends how long does it take
Or
to get
less.
those 3 inches. Do I get 3 hours or 3 days?
This is Nebraska, we've all been here. We have 6 inches tomorrow. I mean, I think it's supposed to rain tomorrow on Grand Island, isn't it? 8,500 or something in December 8th. So, but seriously, think about that yourself. I don't care if you're conventional farming, organic farming, transition farming, or raising cattle and flash grazing. If it rains 3 inches, ask yourself, how much of that 3 inches did I keep? And that'll teach you how to regenerative farm, I think.
How about you guys? Are regenerative and organic mutually exclusive? Are they together? What's your thought?
I think what I do is I farm organically, and probably most of the things I do fit in a regenerative system. So I'm not going to go out and say, I'm a regenerative farmer. Well, I probably am, but I farm organically. One of the issues I'm a little concerned with on regenerative is the definition of it. We really don't have a definition on what regenerative ag is, and I'd like us to kind of settle on that to start with. But the things we do generally, I think, fit in a regenerative system. The one that we personally are unable to do a lot of. We do occasionally do some no-till, but we can't consistently no-till, and that's primarily because of amaranths. Palmer amaranth and that family just kill us. So till we get that issue dealt with, we've done weed surveys on our ground, and the only weed we have that's causing a yield decline in our fields is amaranth.
Okay, boy, we've covered a lot, guys. This has just been absolutely awesome. I started on this end to go that way. To finish up, I'm going to start on the far end and work this way. I always ask my panelists to make sure this group of people that are here today have one thing to remember, to walk away from today from. And you can't duplicate each other's answer and say, yeah, I like that answer. So we'll start on the far end. What's one piece of advice, one thing to remember about organic agriculture that you want these guys to remember? And gals, sorry, guys and gals.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to repeat myself. And whether you're organic farming or conventional farming, if it rains 3 inches, ask yourself, how much of that 3 inches did I keep? And look at your soil samples, look at your organic matter, and just ask yourself that. And repeatedly ask yourself that. That's what I'm going to leave it with.
Tom, final words. What do you think?
It's hard to come down to one thing. There's just so many issues.
There's so many things that we didn't talk about either, transitioning and things like that. But what do you want to make sure?
I cannot overstate the importance of record keeping in organics. Having the ability to understand the rules and follow them. When some of these we have had a recent major issue with some people that were breaking the rules in organic. I'm just infuriated because my customers are paying for a product and they have a right to receive exactly what they're asking for. And when I see people cheating, it just sends me over the edge. So, I think understanding the rules, following them, and again, in organics, if you can't keep records, you're in deep trouble.
All right, Trevor, you get the final say. What do you want to make sure these folks remember here?
I guess one thing, if you're contemplating going into organic, the question would come down to also that we've talked quite a bit about it. Is just, do you want to dedicate the management, the time, a lot of it's just a lot of time, a lot of tractor time, and weed control is I feel like one of the biggest challenges. So are you going to be willing to sacrifice not going on a trip to be in the field? And if you are, great, try it, go. The market's good. It's growing. I think it's going to be around for a long time. I think it's going to grow, and if you can jump in it and do a good job, I think you'll be really successful.
Again, our panel this afternoon has been Mike Sides, Clear Frontier Ag, along with Tom Schwarz from Bertrand, Nebraska area, Nebraska farmer, and of course Trevor Fehr from MJF Farms up in north central Iowa. Let's give our panel a big round of applause here this afternoon, would you please? You guys stuck it out. Thank you for being here this afternoon. It's been great conversation. I know these guys are going to be around. Pick their brains if you have some extra questions. You can mull around. The show is open for another hour until 4 o'clock this afternoon. So with that, I'll say have a great day. Thank you for being here.